Welcome to the deep dive. We are incredibly glad you decided to join us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here.
So, I want to start by having you picture a scenario. And honestly, if you've been in the professional world for more than, I don't know, a few years, there is a very high probability you have lived this firsthand.
Oh, I'm sure they have. It's universally painful.
It really is. Think about a time when you watched a truly brilliant, just incredibly dedicated team pour their absolute souls into a project. We are talking late nights, working weekends, giving up holidays.
Kissing dinner with the kids.
Exactly. And they are executing every single milestone flawlessly. They cross the finish line, the deliverable is perfectly polished, it launches, and, well, absolutely nothing happens.
Crickets.
The needle doesn't move at all. The company's market share doesn't budge. The project, despite being beautifully executed, had zero impact on the organization's big picture goals.
Yeah, and it is a profoundly demoralizing experience.
It's soul-crushing for the team.
It shatters morale. And yet, it is an absolute epidemic in modern corporate environments. Organizations bleed billions of dollars and just completely burn out their top talent, executing the wrong things perfectly.
Executing the wrong things perfectly. That is the core of what we are tackling today. We're looking at the vital and honestly often entirely misunderstood discipline of aligning organizational strategy with project selection.
Right, because project management has fundamentally mutated.
Yeah, it's no longer just the operational grind of Gantt charts, keeping things on time, staying under budget. It has become the primary mechanism for strategic survival.
We are looking past the mere mechanics of resource allocation today. We are going to examine the underlying philosophy, the actual why behind it all.
Because a persistent lack of alignment between what the C-suite claims the company is trying to achieve and what the rank and file are actually building all day, that will quietly dismantle an organization from the inside out.
It breeds cynicism, and it wastes capital at an astonishing rate.
We're pulling from an incredible stack of source material to get through this today. We're primarily unpacking the deep research found in Chapter 2 of Project Management, the managerial process. But this is far from dry academic theory.
No, not at all.
We're diving into real-world, high-stakes case studies. We will look at IBM's massive pivot, the sheer chaos of Frontier Airlines navigating bankruptcy, and a legendary, just heartbreaking cautionary tale from the labs of Xerox.
Our mission for you today is to provide the ultimate shortcut to understanding how the most resilient organizations decide exactly what to greenlight and what to kill.
We want to ensure that the daily grind you and your team's experience translates directly into long-term strategic dominance.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with this massive shift in the very definition of a project manager. Because the old school paradigm is dead.
It's been dead for a while, yeah.
Historically, strategy was this esoteric thing reserved for executives in the boardroom. They went on a retreat, formulated a 5-year plan, came down from the mountain with the stone tablets, and handed them to the project managers.
The PMs were simply the foremen.
Right. They didn't ask questions.
Yeah.
They just built the house to the blueprints provided.
But that compartmentalization is no longer viable in a fast-paced market. Project management is now recognized as the apex where strategy and operations collide. There's this great quote from Lee Bowman, a prominent leadership scholar, and he captures this perfectly. He says, "A vision without a strategy remains an illusion."
A vision without a strategy remains an illusion.
But we have to take that a step further for our purposes. An organization uses projects to physically manifest that strategy into tangible products, services, or internal capabilities. The project is the literal vehicle that moves the company from where we are to where we want to be.
So, playing devil's advocate here. If I'm a project manager in the weeds trying to hit my quarterly deadlines, or even just a developer or an engineer on the team, why do I need to care about the C-suite's overarching strategy? Shouldn't I just put my head down, write my code, build my widget, and let the executives worry about the big picture?
I hear that all the time. And that mindset is exactly how projects fail to deliver value. Different overarching strategies require entirely different execution mentalities at the ground level.
Give me an example.
Consider Intel. Historically, their major strategic thrust has been differentiation. They rely on massive R&D projects to create highly specialized cutting-edge chips, not just for PCs, but for automotive systems, advanced security, mobile technology.
So their goal is to be unique.
Exactly. Their projects are greenlit and managed with the primary goal of creating unique, defensible value. Innovation is their North Star.
But contrast that with a company whose entire strategy is based on speed to market or operational efficiency. Look at the historical shifts in manufacturing with companies like Procter & Gamble, General Electric, or AT&T.
Yep.
When they pivoted their strategies to aggressively reduce cycle times, like slashing them by 20 to 50%, or when Toyota revolutionized auto manufacturing to develop new cars in 3 years instead of 7, the rules of the game changed entirely for their project managers.
Precisely. For Toyota, a project proposing a radical new engineering mechanism that adds 2 years to the development cycle is a bad project.
Even if the engineering is brilliant.
Even if it's brilliant, because it violates the core strategy. This is why anyone touching a project must understand the strategic context. It dictates everyday decision-making.
Let's play that out with a tangible scenario for the listener. Imagine you are managing the development of a new consumer electronic device. You are 3 months away from launch.
Okay, high pressure.
Very high pressure.
Yeah.
One of your lead engineers comes to you and says, hey, we found a way to slightly modify the internal design. It will make the device run 5% cooler and extend the battery life by about 20 minutes.
Sounds great on paper.
Right. But to retool the manufacturing line for this tweak, it will delay our launch by a month and add $500,000 to the budget. Do you approve it?
Well, without knowing the strategy, you are just flipping a coin.
Exactly.
If your company's strategic mandate is to be the undisputed premium product leader through relentless quality and innovation, think Apple, then yes, you probably approve the delay. The 5% performance bump serves the brand promise.
It reinforces why people pay a premium for the product.
Right. However, if the overarching strategy is operational excellence through low-cost solutions, or if capturing first-mover advantage in a new product category is the absolute priority, you reject that tweak instantly.
Speed and cost would trump the minor performance enhancement.
Every time.
But if the project manager is ignorant of that top-level strategy, they might approve the delay because in a vacuum, a better battery sounds like a universally good idea. They make the wrong granular decision because they lack the macro context.
And beyond daily decision-making, there is the vital element of project advocacy. A project manager has to be a political champion for their initiative.
Oh, absolutely.
In any healthy organization, resources are scarce. You are competing for budget, for server space, for the best engineers. If you cannot clearly and forcefully articulate how your specific project advances the firm's strategic mission, senior management will defund you.
And they'll give those resources to a manager who can.
Exactly.
Not to mention, you have to sell the project to your own team. People are infinitely more motivated when they understand the purpose of their labor. If you tell an engineer, build this database because I said so, you get basic compliance.
If you're lucky.
Right. But if you say, building this database allows us to analyze customer data faster, which directly supports our corporate strategy to expand into the European market next year, you get engagement.
They know how their specific brick is building the cathedral.
I love that analogy. But what happens when that priority system breaks down? When the C-suite fails to build a coherent bridge between their strategy and the projects being executed below them?
The organization develops very specific, highly destructive symptoms.
Let's get into those. We are going to look at the 3 major problems that crop up when this disconnect happens. And I guarantee you, the listener, have witnessed at least one of these in your career. Let's start with problem 1, the implementation gap.
The classic disconnect.
This is when top management goes off-site, formulates a brilliant strategy, and they identify the top 20 initiatives the company needs to execute this year to achieve it. But they make one fatal error.
They don't rank them.
They just issue a list of 20 equally important top priorities.
Which is mathematically impossible. Calling 20 different things a top priority is an oxymoron.
It really is.
The lack of forced ranking is the genesis of organizational chaos. Because without a definitive hierarchy dictated from the top, every functional department is forced to interpret that list of 20 projects through the lens of their own internal biases, metrics, and departmental needs.
And that leads to total gridlock. Let's role-play this. Say the information technology department looks at the list and decides that Project A, maybe a massive back-end security overhaul, is their absolute #1 priority.
Makes sense for IT.
But the finance department looks at the exact same list and rates Project A as their 10th priority, because their bonuses are tied to Project F, a new billing system.
So the IT project manager then walks into the finance department asks for the budget approvals or the personnel needed to launch the security overhaul, and finance shuts them down.
They say, we don't have time for your security project. We are putting all our resources into the billing system.
You end up with massive clashes between departments, a complete breakdown of cross-functional trust, and desperate resource hoarding. Every department becomes an impenetrable silo, fighting a turf war.
Look at the data on this. Deloitte Consulting surveyed a massive pool of global executives a while back, and the numbers are a staggering indictment of modern management. Only 23% of those executives believed their project portfolios were actually aligned with their core business strategy.
Less than a quarter.
Less than a quarter.
That means 77% of top executives are looking at the work their companies are doing and feeling a profound sense of disconnect. That implementation gap is a silent killer of productivity and morale.
And the dysfunction deepens when we transition to problem 2, organization politics. Because when clear, strategically aligned criteria for selecting projects are absent, that void isn't just left empty.
No, nature abhors a vacuum. It is immediately filled by power dynamics and ego.
Enter the dreaded sacred cow. We all know what this is. This is the project that receives...
The research highlights a phenomenal real-world example of this pathology. There was a marketing director who hired an external independent consultant to conduct a rigorous market analysis for a proposed new product.
Okay.
The consultant does the legwork, runs the focus groups, crunches the demographic data, and the conclusion is glaringly obvious. There is absolutely zero consumer demand for this product.
None.
Launching it would be a catastrophic waste of capital.
So he hands the report to the marketing director, fully expecting to be thanked for saving the company millions.
Instead, the marketing director takes the report, buries it in a drawer, and swears the consultant to absolute secrecy.
Why?
Because this objectively terrible product idea was the new CEO's new baby. The marketing director knew that using data to kill the CEO's pet project was a fantastic way to get fired.
That is the anatomy of a sacred cow. It is a project that consumes capital, time, and the mental energy of the workforce purely to placate an executive ego. It bypasses all analytical rigor because the political cost of challenging it is deemed too high.
But corporate politics isn't just about bad projects surviving. It's equally about brilliant, world-changing projects being smothered in their cribs because of internal rivalries.
And there is no better or honestly more tragic example of this than the story of the Xerox ALTO project from the 1970s. This is one of the most profound cautionary tales in business history.
It really is.
Xerox set up the Palo Alto Research Center Park on the West Coast, far away from their corporate headquarters back east. They hired the smartest computer scientists on Earth. And what did they invent? Everything.
They essentially invented the modern digital world. The team at Park developed the first workable computer mouse, the first graphical user interface with windows and icons, the first laser printer, and the first local area network, Ethernet.
They had all of this revolutionary technology functioning brilliantly in their labs a full 5 years before their nearest competitor. They literally had the future of personal computing sitting on their desks.
If they had capitalized on it, Xerox would be Apple, Microsoft, and HP combined today.
But they squandered the greatest technological lead in history. And they didn't lose it because the check was flawed. They lost it because of intense corporate politics and the fatal lack of a project sponsor.
Now, a project sponsor is typically a senior executive who believes in the project and acts as a political shield. They protect the team from bureaucracy and secure funding during those really vulnerable early development phases.
Right.
The Xerox ALTO project lacked a powerful champion back at the East Coast headquarters. The executives there were copier men.
They sold paper and toner.
Exactly. They didn't understand computers, they didn't see the strategic value of a mouse or a graphical interface, and they viewed the PR key researchers as eccentric academics wasting money.
Without that political cover, the ALTO project was starved of commercialization resources and torn apart by internal rivalries. The executives essentially left the vault door open. And Steve Jobs, famously toured PRs, saw the graphical user interface, recognized its world-changing potential instantly, and took the ideas back to Apple to build the Macintosh.
Technological brilliance is utterly useless if you do not have the political alignment and sponsorship to push it through the corporate immune system.
Which naturally accelerates us into problem 3, resource conflicts and multitasking. When you suffer from an implementation gap and your portfolio is bloated with politically driven sacred cows and pet projects, the mathematical reality is that you end up with too many active projects and not enough human beings to execute them.
You enter a toxic multi-project environment. Everyone is forced to share resources across competing priorities.
We see this everywhere. It's the matrix organization structure taken to its worst extreme, where an engineer is assigned to 4 different projects, reporting to 4 different project managers, all of whom claim their project is the absolute top priority.
What's fascinating here is how the human brain actually processes this structural overload. When resources are spread too thin, it forces rampant multitasking.
Which people love to brag about.
Right. In our modern hustle culture, multitasking is often lauded as a high-performance skill. People put it on their resumes. But from a strict project management and cognitive science perspective, multitasking is an absolute disaster for productivity.
It's a myth. The brain doesn't actually multitask, it task switches rapidly, and every time you switch, there is a tax. If you are an engineer deeply focused on complex coding for Project A and you get pulled into an urgent firefighting meeting for Project B, you have to cognitively disengage from the code.
That is what the literature refers to as conceptual or physical shutdown in startup. You don't just sit back down at your desk after the meeting and instantly resume coding at peak efficiency.
No way.
It takes significant time, often 20 to 30 minutes, to rebuild the mental architecture of the problem you were solving. Remember where you left off, and achieve that state of deep focus again.
It's like trying to drive a car by flooring the gas, slamming the brakes, turning off the engine, turning it back on, and flooring it again. You burn massive amounts of fuel, in this case, mental energy, but you barely move forward.
That's a great analogy.
When you force your workforce to juggle too many projects, you are institutionalizing inefficiency. The aggregate result of everyone multitasking is that project durations stretch out, costs balloon, and people burn out because they feel like they are working 60-hour weeks, but nothing is ever crossing the finish line.
This is why a rigorous priority system linked directly to a strategic plan isn't just an exercise in corporate governance. It is a necessary mechanism for maintaining the sanity, focus, and productivity of your workforce. You have to restrict the flow of projects into the system to match the actual capacity of your teams.
So how do we actually fix this? How do organizations build a functional bridge between the lofty vision of the CEO and the daily reality of the project teams?
The established framework for this is the strategic management process.
Which is broken down into 4 distinct, highly iterative steps. This is the mechanism for answering, what are we, and what do we intend to be? Let's walk through the architecture of this process. Step 1 is to review and define the organizational mission. And here is where most companies stumble right out of the gate. Your mission statement has to actually mean something.
It cannot be a vague, aspirational platitude designed to look good on a plaque in the lobby. Consider the difference between a mission statement like, we provide information technology services versus we provide advanced data mining and predictive analysis services for the healthcare sector.
The first one is completely useless as a strategic filter. Information technology services is so broad that almost any tech project on Earth could technically be justified under it.
True.
If any of your competitors can copy and paste your mission statement onto their website and it still rings true, it is failing. A sharply defined mission sets the tight, restrictive parameters required to evaluate potential projects later on.
Once you know exactly who you are, you move to step 2. Analyze and formulate strategies. This requires a brutally honest assessment of your current reality. Who are your actual customers? What are their evolving needs? Who are the new competitors entering the space?
You conduct a rigorous SWOT analysis, mapping your internal strengths and weaknesses against external opportunities and threats.
And it's crucial to realize that opportunities and threats are frequently 2 sides of the exact same coin.
How so?
Well, take a sudden shift in government regulation, like new data privacy laws. That is a massive threat if you are unprepared. It adds compliance costs and slows down operations. But if you have a highly agile legal and tech team, that same regulation is a massive opportunity. You can build compliant systems faster than your competitors, pivot your strategy, and capture their market share while they are still scrambling.
I see. So the goal of this analysis is to ask critical, exclusionary questions. Does this potential path exploit our unique competitive advantages? Does it align with our financial risk tolerance? You take the vast, infinite universe of things the company could do, and you ruthlessly winnow it down to a critical few strategic directives.
Exactly. And once you have those directives, you arrive at step 3. Set objectives to achieve strategies. We all know the drill here. Objectives have to be smart, specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-related.
But the real magic isn't the acronym itself. It's how those objectives behave within the corporate hierarchy. It's the concept of cascading objectives.
Cascading is the physical translation of strategy into execution. Let's look at a clear illustrative example. Imagine a mid-sized company that manufactures premium leather luggage. At the highest executive level, the board sets a macro-organizational objective. We must achieve a 40% increase in overall sales within the next 3 years to satisfy shareholders.
That is the big target. But a 40% sales increase isn't a project, it's a goal. So that objective cascades down to the next level of management. The head of the research and development department looks at that 40% target and formulates a specific strategy to support it. R&D decides, to drive that kind of growth, we can't just sell more of our current bags, we need to innovate. Our strategy will be to design a revolutionary line of pull-type luggage with hidden, retractable wheels.
Now we're getting closer to the ground. That R&D strategy then cascades down one more level to the project managers. The strategy becomes a specific, actionable project objective. Develop the prototype for the retractable wheel luggage, ready for market testing within 6 months, not to exceed a development budget of $200,000.
Look at the line of sight there. It is perfectly unbroken. The project manager tracking their $200,000 budget knows exactly how their daily work directly feeds the R&D director's strategy, which directly fulfills the CEO's 40% growth mandate.
And if a project does not have that clear line of sight back up to the top, it should not exist.
Which brings us to the final and most demanding phase, step 4. Implement strategies through projects. There is a fascinating asymmetry in how organizations allocate time to this process.
There really is. Formulating the strategy, the off-site meetings, the market analysis, the vision statements, typically consumes only about 20% of management's overall effort.
The other 80% of the effort is entirely consumed by implementation. Deciding what to do is the easy part. The brutal heavy lifting is the execution. It requires the precise allocation of capital, the recruitment of specialized talent, the development of new technological skills, and navigating the friction of organizational change.
To really cement how a massive, complex project must serve long-term strategy, let's look at one of the most famous technology projects of the 21st century, IBM's Watson.
Oh, this is a great one. Anyone who was watching television in 2010 remembers this. IBM built a supercomputer named Watson, programmed it to process natural language, and put it on the game show Jeopardy! Against Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter, the two greatest human champions in the show's history.
It was a huge cultural phenomenon.
It really was. Watson was analyzing complex, nuanced clues, understanding puns and wordplay, and buzzing in with terrifying speed. It absolutely destroyed the human players. But the analytical question we have to ask is, was building a game show winning robot a radical new strategic pivot for IBM?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is a definitive no. Watson was not a sudden departure. It was actually a perfectly calibrated manifestation of a strategy IBM had been methodically executing for over a decade.
Right, because IBM had long ago recognized that hardware profit margins were shrinking globally.
Their overarching strategy was to pivot away from being a hardware manufacturer and transform into a high-value service products company.
They didn't spend millions developing Watson just for the PR stunt of winning Jeopardy! They used the game show as an incredibly public, high-stakes stress test for their proprietary natural language processing AI. The strategic objective was always to commercialize that technology for massive enterprise clients.
They took the Watson architecture, which was capable of parsing 200 million pages of unstructured data and executing trillions of operations per second, and they immediately pointed it at the healthcare sector. They began collaborating with massive medical institutions to design a doctor's consultant program.
The goal wasn't to build a robot doctor to replace human physicians. The service product was an analytical tool. Watson could digest every single current medical journal, every clinical trial, integrate a patient's specific electronic health records, and use complex algorithms to provide a human doctor with a ranked list of diagnostic options, complete with confidence intervals.
That is a pure service product. It solves a massive data overload problem for oncologists and diagnosticians. The Jeopardy match was flashy and fun, but underneath the surface, it was deeply, inextricably tied to IBM's long-term organizational DNA.
It demonstrates that even the most bleeding-edge sci-fi projects must ultimately serve the core corporate strategy to be deemed a success.
Okay, so we understand the strategy, But even with a clear strategy, a large organization will generate hundreds of ideas for potential projects. How do they sort through the pile?
You need a taxonomy. You have to categorize the work before you can evaluate it. The standard framework divides projects into three distinct classifications.
The first bucket is compliance projects, frequently referred to as must-do projects. These are not optional. They're dictated by emergencies, safety hazards, or regulatory mandates. If you fail to execute these projects, the penalties are existential.
Like if an auto parts manufacturer has a factory completely destroyed by a tsunami, the project to rebuild it and get the supply chain moving again is a must-do. Or if a new federal data privacy law passes, the IT project to encrypt all customer data is compliance. You don't sit in a boardroom and calculate the return on investment for a compliance project. You just fund it because the alternative is being shut down by the government or going bankrupt.
The second classification is operational projects. These are initiatives specifically designed to support, maintain, and incrementally improve the current operations of the business. They don't invent new markets, but they make the current machine run better.
Give us some examples of those.
Implementing a total quality management system, upgrading legacy software to reduce licensing costs, or optimizing a logistics network to cut delivery times. They are the bread and butter of continuous improvement.
And the third bucket is strategic projects. These are the big swings. These projects directly support the long-term mission and are aimed at generating net new revenue, capturing entirely new market share, or disrupting an industry.
Developing a completely new product line, funding exploratory R&D for next-generation technology, or executing a merger and acquisition project.
To truly grasp the vital importance of categorizing these projects before evaluating them, let's run through a thought experiment. Imagine you are the general manager of a large, traditional, fun-in-the-sun hotel resort in Hawaii. The board of directors has analyzed the market and decided to radically pivot the resort's strategic focus.
Okay, what's the pivot?
They want to transform into an ecotourism destination, aggressively targeting the environmentally conscious traveler. You have a massive backlog of project proposals. How do you classify them?
All right, let's play this out.
I'm looking at the first proposal. Convert the resort's massive pool heating system from grid electricity to a dedicated solar power array. How do we classify that?
Well, it requires significant capital, but it directly serves the new core mandate of ecotourism. It becomes a major marketing point. That is a strategic project.
Now look at the next proposal. Update all the bathrooms in the guest condos that are 10 years old or older. Does renovating a bathroom advance the specific ecotourism strategy?
Not intrinsically. It's simply maintaining the baseline quality standards expected of a resort. Therefore, it's an operational project.
Let's pull one more. Test and revise the resort's hurricane and tsunami disaster response plan based on the new county safety requirements.
The phrase new county safety requirements is the neon sign there. That is a compliance project. If the county inspectors arrive and your plan isn't updated, they fine you or shut you down.
The reason this classification exercise is paramount is because it is functionally impossible to compare projects across different categories using the same criteria. You cannot put a bathroom renovation and a mandatory hurricane safety update into the same financial spreadsheet and pick the one with the higher ROI.
The compliance project will always have a terrible ROI, but it still must be funded. You have to evaluate strategic projects against other strategic projects and operational against operational.
Once you have your buckets, you need a filtering mechanism to evaluate the ideas within them. The standard industry system is the phase gate model.
Think of this as a series of checkpoints, or gates, that a project must survive. At every single gate, a management committee looks at the data and makes one of three binary decisions: go, kill, or recycle.
Go means you get the funding to proceed to the next phase of planning. Kill means the project is dead, immediately halting the burn rate of resources. Recycle means the core idea is solid, but the proposal is flawed and needs to be revised and submitted again later.
The model typically outlines 6 sequential phases, moving from initial idea generation through formal proposal, detailed screening, implementation planning, progress evaluation, and finally, closure. But the most insightful element of this entire framework is that Gate 1 is completely invisible.
Gate 1 does not happen in a conference room. It happens entirely within the psychology of the individual employee. Let's say a mid-level engineer has an idea for a new product. Before they ever write a memo or ask for a meeting, they have to decide if it is even worth the political capital and time to submit a proposal.
They might bounce the idea off a colleague at lunch or do a quick web search to see if a competitor is already doing it.
This is where organizational transparency pays massive dividends. If the C-suite has clearly communicated the strategic objectives to the entire company, that engineer can self-filter. They look at their idea, realize it doesn't align with the new ecotourism strategy, and they kill it themselves at gate one.
This invisible filtering saves the organization thousands of hours of management time that would otherwise be wasted reviewing off-strategy proposals.
But if the idea survives that invisible gate one, the employee writes a formal proposal, which is phase two. Now it hits gate two, where management conducts a high-level strategic sanity check. Does this solve a recognized business problem? Does it fit our mission?
If the answer is yes, it passes through to phase three. Screening and selection. This is gate three. This is the crucible. This is where the heavy mathematical and strategic evaluation happens. Is the technology feasible? Will it cannibalize our other products? Do we actually have the engineers to build it?
Which brings us to the core tension of project management. At gate three, you are looking at a stack of strategically aligned proposals, but you only have the budget to fund half of them. How do you choose?
Here's where it gets really interesting. How do executives actually pick the winners and losers?
We have to look at the selection criteria, which fundamentally divide into financial and non-financial models. Let's start with the financials, because for most of the 20th century, the math was all that mattered. The simplest, oldest financial tool in the should is the payback model.
The payback model is brutally simple. It measures exactly how long it will take for the project to generate enough cash flow to recover its initial investment. Imagine you are reviewing two manufacturing projects. Project A requires an initial capital outlay of $700,000, but it will automate a process that saves the company $225,000 a year in labor costs. You divide $700K by $225K, and your payback period is 3.1 years.
Now look at Project B. It requires a smaller upfront investment of $400,000, and it will generate $110,000 a year in new revenue. The payback period for Project B is 3.6 years. If the company's internal policy is, we only fund projects that completely pay for themselves within 5 years, then both of these projects pass the test.
The appeal of the payback model is obvious. It is easy to calculate, it emphasizes immediate cash flow, and it is a fantastic tool for weeding out highly speculative, long-term projects when a company is cash-strapped. However, relying solely on this model is incredibly dangerous. It has two massive blind spots.
First, it completely ignores the time value of money. It assumes that the $225,000 you save in year 3 is worth exactly the same as the $225,000 you save today.
Which is false.
Anyone who understands inflation or opportunity cost knows that is false. A dollar today is intrinsically more valuable than a dollar promised 3 years from now because you can invest today's dollar.
Second, the payback model is completely blind to profitability after the investment is recovered. Let's go back to our example. Project A pays back faster. But what if the technology in Project A becomes obsolete in year 4, meaning it generates zero value after payback? Meanwhile, Project B, which took slightly longer to pay back, might be a patent-protected product that generates $500,000 a year in pure profit for the next decade.
The payback model would favor the inferior Project A.
Because of these flaws, any sophisticated organization relies on the net present value, or NPV, model. NPV introduces reality into the math by using management's minimum desired rate of return, often called a hurdle rate or discount rate. This rate represents the cost of capital or the return the company could get by simply investing that money elsewhere.
NPV mathematically discounts future cash flows back to their present-day value. If you require a 15% return on your capital, the model applies that 15% discount to every future dollar the project promises to generate. If you add up all those discounted future cash flows and subtract your initial investment, and the final number is positive, it means the project is legitimately generating wealth above your hurdle rate. It's a go.
If the NPV is negative, it means the project is actually destroying value, even if it eventually pays back the principal.
But, and this is a vital caveat, even a perfect NPV calculation is not the whole story. Relying exclusively on financial models to select projects will systematically destroy a company's strategic future. Researchers like Foti have proven this. Companies that govern their portfolios purely by ROI end up with heavily unbalanced portfolios.
They over-index on safe, incremental improvements and completely miss the disruptive, high-risk innovations.
This is why non-financial criteria are equally critical. A C-suite must be willing to occasionally fund a project that looks absolutely terrible on an NPV spreadsheet. Why would you knowingly accept a financial loss on a project?
To secure strategic dominance. A company might aggressively fund a low-margin project simply to capture market share quickly, bleeding competitors dry.
Or they might intentionally fund an enabler product. This is a classic strategy. An enabler product might barely break even or even lose money, but its sheer existence drives massive high-margin sales in a related ecosystem.
Look at the video game industry. Microsoft and Sony often sell their gaming consoles at a loss. The console project itself has a negative ROI, but placing that console in millions of living rooms enables the sale of highly profitable software, subscriptions, and accessories.
Furthermore, organizations will fund projects specifically to develop core, next-generation technology, knowing the first iteration won't be profitable. They might launch a project simply to vertically integrate and reduce their dependency on a volatile supplier.
Or, crucially, they might launch a preemptive project to stave off government regulation, proving they can police themselves. You cannot capture the strategic value of avoiding a federal antitrust lawsuit on a simple payback spreadsheet.
Because no single metric, neither pure math nor pure strategic theory, can capture a project's total value, organizations are forced to use multi-criteria screening models. You have to synthesize the quantitative and the qualitative. The two primary methods for doing this are checklists and multi-weighted scoring models.
Let's analyze checklists first. A checklist is a straightforward evaluation tool. Management creates a list of binary or open-ended questions. Does this project target our new demographic? Do we have the engineering talent in-house? Is the technology proven? The project team fills it out, and the committee reviews it.
The primary advantage of a checklist is extreme flexibility. It can be applied universally across the IT department, the marketing department, and R&D. It forces a dialogue about the project's broad impact. But the checklist has a fatal structural flaw.
It does not force ranking.
Exactly. If Project Alpha receives 8 yes answers and 2 no answers on the checklist, and Project Beta receives 6 yes answers and 4 no answers, which is better, you might assume Project Alpha. But what if Project Beta's 2 negative answers are minor logistical issues, while Project Alpha's 1 negative answer is violates current EPA regulations? A checklist treats all criteria as equal, which leaves the evaluation entirely subjective. And subjectivity is the breeding ground for corporate politics. Because you can't mathematically defend a checklist score, the loudest voice in the room wins. The VP of sales can argue that their project is critical, talk over the engineering director, and get their sacred cow funded. A checklist is too soft to stop a determined executive.
To strip the emotion and the politics out of the room, you must graduate to a multi-weighted scoring model. This framework takes all the qualitative and quantitative criteria that genuinely matter to the organization, and it assigns a specific mathematical weight to each one, reflecting its relative strategic importance.
It is the literal translation of strategy into an algorithm. If your company decides that speed to market is twice as important as profit margin this year, you weight the speed criteria at a 10 and the profit criteria at a 5. Any project that promises to launch quickly gets a massive mathematical multiplier, rocketing it to the top of the priority list.
A brilliant historical example of this is 3M. For years, 3M had a core strategic objective that 20% of their total corporate revenue must be generated by products that were less than 4 years old. This forced continuous innovation, but when leadership wanted to accelerate growth, they aggressively increased that target to 25%.
To ensure that strategic shift actually materialized, they didn't just send a memo. They fundamentally altered the weights in their project scoring matrix, heavily biasing the math toward projects that could rapidly deliver net new products.
To really internalize how powerful and how necessary this mathematical discipline can be during an existential crisis, we need to dive deep into the story of Frontier Airlines.
The year is 2008. The global financial system is melting down, fuel prices are incredibly volatile, and Frontier Airlines is forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company is fighting for its life.
Enter Jerry Cody, the Chief Information Officer for Frontier at the time. He inherits an IT department in absolute disarray. They had a staggering backlog of over 100 active IT projects.
How does a mid-size airline even accumulate 100 active IT projects? Cody analyzed the portfolio and found an archaeological dig of corporate dysfunction. He found classic sacred cows championed by executives who didn't even work at the airline anymore. He found massive redundancies, pet projects, and initiatives that offered zero tangible value to the passenger or the bottom line.
But because they lacked a prioritized screening model, the IT department was desperately trying to inch all 100 projects forward simultaneously.
The multitasking penalty we discussed earlier was paralyzing them. Because resources were spread across 100 projects, Nothing was being completed. The IT department was locked in gridlock at the exact historical moment the airline required maximum agility to survive bankruptcy.
Cody knew he had to stop the bleeding instantly. He formed a steering committee composed of senior management from across the airline, and he instituted a ruthless, highly concentrated, weighted scoring scheme.
The criteria were stripped down to the absolute bare essentials of corporate survival. Does this project help planes fly safely? Does it immediately generate revenue? Does it significantly reduce operational costs? And does it tangibly improve customer service? That was it.
They forced every single one of those 100 backlog projects to run the gauntlet of that scoring model. The matrix stripped all the emotion out of the room. An executive could no longer argue, but this software upgrade is really cool. If it didn't score high on revenue generation or cost reduction, the math killed it.
Cody reported that the scoring model easily weeded out the fluff. They slaughtered the sacred cows. By the time the committee finished their evaluations, they had ruthlessly slashed the IT portfolio from over 100 fragmented projects down to fewer than 30 highly concentrated, mission-critical initiatives.
The IT team could finally focus their resources, execute and deliver value that actively helped pull the airline out of Chapter 11. That is the power of a weighted matrix in a crisis.
To give our listeners a visceral understanding of how to build and argue over one of these matrices, we need to analyze the film prioritization case study in depth. This exercise perfectly simulates the tension of Gate 3. You are placed in the role of a senior executive on the priority team for the film division of a major entertainment conglomerate.
The division is in trouble. Profit margins have plummeted because 3 of your last 5 big-budget films have completely flopped at the box office. The CEO hands down the strategic framework for greenlighting the next slate of films. First, he establishes the must objectives. These are the absolute binary filters.
The musts are non-negotiable. Every proposed film must adhere strictly to all legal and safety standards during production. Because the conglomerate's brand identity is family entertainment, every film must receive a PG rating or lower. No R-rated content. And finally, the film's production cannot negatively impact the ongoing operations of the company's other divisions, like their theme parks. If a script violates even one of those 3 rules, it is instantly rejected.
Once a project survives the musts, it is evaluated against the want objectives. These are the strategic goals, and the CEO has assigned specific weights to them based on current corporate priorities.
The goals include winning an Academy Award for prestige, generating significant merchandise revenue like toys and apparel, raising public consciousness about environmental issues, which is a personal passion of the CEO this year, generating a profit margin above 18% for financial recovery, advancing the state-of-the-art in computer animation, and providing a foundational IP for a new theme park ride.
Let's pit 2 of the proposed films from the case study against each other and see how the matrix dictates the decision. First, we have proposal number 4. Escape from Rio Japuni. This is pitched as a fully animated feature film set in the Amazon rainforest. It follows a young, charismatic jaguar who must unite the disparate jungle animals to stop a logging corporation from clear-cutting their home.
Okay, let's run it through the matrix. It easily passes all the must objectives, it's animated, so it's safe, and it's a family-friendly PG story. Now, how does it score on the weighted ones? It hits the CEO's environmental consciousness objective perfectly. The narrative is explicitly about saving the rainforest.
More importantly for the bottom line, it is an animated film featuring talking animals. The merchandising potential is astronomical: plush toys, action figures, lunchboxes. Furthermore, a jungle adventure translates seamlessly into an immersive theme park ride, hitting another heavily weighted objective.
And because animated films have predictable global distribution models, the financial projections indicate a very high probability of exceeding the 18% profit margin hurdle.
Rio Japuni scores incredibly high across almost all the highly weighted strategic criteria. Now let's look at the competitor. Proposal number 6. Keiko One Whale of a Story. This is pitched as a big-budget, hybrid film integrating actual live-action documentary footage of Keiko, the famous killer whale, seamlessly blended with cutting-edge CGI. It's a serious biographical drama about his capture, his time in captivity, and the human efforts to rehabilitate him.
Let's score it. It passes the must objectives, and it undeniably hits the environmental awareness objective, perhaps even more powerfully and emotionally than the animated Jaguar film. But we must look at the rest of the matrix. What is the merchandising potential for a serious, live-action and CGI hybrid documentary about a specific real-world whale? It is significantly lower than cartoon jaguars.
And how do you translate the tragic, complex, true story of a captive whale into a fun theme park ride. You can't. It would be entirely tonally inappropriate. So it scores a 0 on that objective. And crucially, integrating live-action footage with cutting-edge CGI over water is notoriously expensive and unpredictable.
The financial projections for Keiko are grim. The quants give it an 80% probability that it will only generate a 6% return on investment.
It completely misses the critical 18% profit hurdle.
Wow.
So when the executive committee reviews these two films, The Matrix forces a clear decision. Even though both films champion the CEO's environmental mandate, Escape from Rio Japuni is objectively the superior strategic asset for the conglomerate.
The scoring model removes the subjective, emotional debate of which script made me cry more and anchors the decision entirely to which asset generates the specific value this corporation needs right now.
We can scale this exact same logic down to a micro-level scenario to see how universally applicable it is. Consider the fundraising project exercise. This is a scenario where a team of university students must select a project to raise money for a local charity. The parameters are tight.
The must objectives for the students are strict. The event must be perfectly safe and legal. It must be guaranteed to earn at least $500. It must be planned and executed in under 9 weeks. And the logistics must be complex enough that every student on the team gets to practice distinct project management skills.
The weighted want objectives for the students include earning significantly more than the $500 baseline, actively increasing public awareness of the charity itself, organizing an event complex enough to put on their professional resumes, securing coverage on the local TV news broadcasts, and finally, making sure the event is actually fun to run.
Let's evaluate 2 proposals. Proposal 1 is Hoops for Hope, a standard 3-on-3 basketball tournament held in the campus gym. Proposal 6 is Build Your Own Box, where the students secure permits to build a massive cardboard shantytown on the Central University Quad, and students sleep outside in the boxes overnight to raise awareness for the local homeless shelter.
Hoops for Hope sounds like a great time. It'll be fun. But look at The Matrix. Will the local news send a camera crew to cover a standard campus basketball tournament? Almost certainly not. Will a basketball tournament radically increase deep, empathetic awareness of the charity? Marginally, at best.
Now analyze Build Your Own Box. Is it fun to sleep on the ground in a cardboard box in November? No. But look at the strategic yields. A sprawling cardboard city erected in the middle of a pristine university quad is highly disruptive. It is a guaranteed visual magnet for local TV news crews.
The media coverage will exponentially amplify awareness for the homeless shelter across the entire city. Managing the permits, security, and logistics of an overnight outdoor event is vastly more complex than booking a gym, making a stellar resume builder.
The basketball tournament is the easy operational choice. Build Your Own Box is the high-value strategic choice. The weighted scoring model proves it. But, and this is a massive caveat that must be stressed, the models do not make the decisions.
Human beings make decisions. The mathematical matrix is merely a sophisticated tool to guide the evaluation process. It forces the committee to consider all relevant variables, exposes hidden biases, and provides an objective baseline for debate. But management must always retain the authority to override the model if external, unquantifiable factors arise. A matrix should never be allowed to devolve into a blind, inflexible dictator.
Right. The numbers frame the conversation. They don't replace the judgment of experienced leaders, which provides a perfect segue into our final area of focus. Segment 7. Managing the portfolio and balancing the mix. Because the job is not finished just because Gate 3 is closed and the projects are selected, you have to manage the resulting ecosystem.
In large organizations, this continuous oversight is typically executed by a dedicated governance team or a project management office. The overarching mandate of the governance team is to protect the integrity of the priority system. They must ensure the process remains dynamic, open, and permanently hostile to power politics. The most potent weapon they have to enforce this is radical transparency.
Most sophisticated organizations achieve this by utilizing their internal intranets or electronic bulletin boards. They publish the complete priority list of every single active project in the company. Anyone in the organization can log in and see exactly where their project ranks, its current health status, and most importantly, the exact matrix score that justified its selection.
When you democratize the data, you eliminate the shadows where political manipulation thrives. If the VP of marketing tries to push a pet project to the front of the queue, the engineering team can point to the public dashboard and say, "Your project scored a 42. We are currently executing projects that scored 85 and above. We cannot allocate resources to you." Radical transparency makes it incredibly embarrassing to champion a sacred cow.
Now, managing a massive transparent portfolio of dozens or hundreds of projects requires organization, and the text includes a fantastic tangent here about the psychology of project code names. You can't just call everything Software Update 4.2. Giving projects unique identifiers is functionally necessary, but the choice of name often serves a deeper purpose.
The historical context of code names is fascinating. Often the primary purpose is operational security, particularly in defense or highly competitive tech sectors. During the Cold War, the U.S. Department of Defense used the entirely opaque codename Oxcart to mask the development of the Lockheed A-12, a highly classified supersonic reconnaissance aircraft. The name deliberately sounds mundane to deflect espionage.
Other times, a code name is wielded as a preemptive public relations weapon. When the U.S. government invaded Panama in 1989 to oust Manuel Noriega, they didn't call it the Panama Invasion. They officially designated it Operation Just Cause. The project name itself is an aggressive psychological argument for the morality of the action.
In the corporate realm, code names are frequently deployed to inspire the team and signal the strategic ambition of the project. When Nintendo was developing the console that would eventually be released as the Wii, they used the internal code name Revolution. Every time an engineer or designer logged a ticket for Project Revolution, they were subliminally reminded that they weren't just building another box, they were tasked with completely upending the gaming industry paradigm.
And sometimes, code names are simply a pressure valve for the sheer, grinding stress of project management. The text notes examples of suites of software projects affectionately named after Smurfs, Papa Smurf, Handy Smurf. But the greatest example of IT department gallows humor is a software project that was officially given the acronym ALINA. It stood for At Least It Is Not Access. You can feel the collective trauma of the database engineers who named that project.
Humor aside, the governance team must look at all these uniquely named projects, the Oxcarts, the Revolutions, the Alinas, and they must balance the aggregate portfolio. This requires a total organizational perspective. A proposed project might score a spectacular 95 on the multi-weighted matrix. In a vacuum, it's a go. But the governance team might still reject it if they realize the current portfolio is already dangerously over-leveraged with high-risk projects, or if this new project requires the exact same 3 senior software architects who are already committed to another critical initiative.
To visualize this complex balancing act, the text introduces a brilliant analytical framework developed by David and Jim Matheson. They spent years analyzing massive R&D organizations and developed the project portfolio matrix. It maps every project on a graph using 2 axes.
The vertical axis is technical feasibility, meaning how confident are we that we can actually build this thing? The horizontal axis is commercial potential, meaning if we build it, how much financial or strategic value will it generate? Plotting these creates 4 distinct quadrants, representing 4 distinct archetypes of projects.
The first quadrant is the bread and butter projects. These initiatives possess high technical feasibility, they use established technology, and your team knows exactly how to execute them, but they offer relatively modest commercial value. These are your routine software upgrades, minor manufacturing cost reductions, or evolutionary product tweaks. They are essential to keep the lights on and maintain parity with competitors, but they will not drive explosive growth.
The second quadrant is the target zone. These are the pearls. Pearls are low-risk, highly feasible projects that promise massive commercial payoffs. They typically leverage proven, existing technology, but apply it in a revolutionary new way or to a completely new market.
Subsurface acoustic imaging for oil exploration is a classic example of a pearl. The technology was understood, the implementation risk was manageable, but the commercial value of accurately locating deep oil reserves was staggering. Organizations must aggressively capitalize on every pearl they can identify.
The third quadrant is where the stress happens. These are the oysters. Oysters are characterized by low technical feasibility, but incredibly high commercial potential. These are the moonshots. They require massive technological breakthroughs, unproven science, or inventing entirely new manufacturing processes.
Developing viable commercial fusion energy or a cure for a complex disease using embryonic DNA manipulation, you are taking a colossal financial gamble. Most oysters fail. But if you have the capital to sustain the R&D and you finally manage to crack the oyster open, the pearl inside grants you total market dominance. A healthy organization must carefully vend a select few oysters to secure their long-term future.
And finally, we arrive at the fourth quadrant, the graveyard, the white elephants. These are projects that possess low technical feasibility and offer low commercial value. Now, no one intentionally launches a white elephant. The text clarifies that these are almost always projects that used to be oysters or pearls, but the world changed.
Exactly. A project becomes a white elephant when its foundational assumptions collapse. Perhaps you spent 3 years developing a revolutionary new consumer device, but 6 months before you launch, a competitor releases a superior version at half the price. The commercial value of your project instantly drops to zero. Or you are developing a new chemical process, and new lab results prove it produces highly toxic, unmanageable byproducts, destroying its technical feasibility.
This raises an important question, and it is perhaps the single most critical diagnostic question for anyone evaluating a corporate portfolio. How many white elephants is your organization currently feeding? The Matheson's research revealed a depressing reality. Most organizations consistently suffer from a severe misallocation of resources. They have far too many white elephants draining capital and talent, and far too few pearls and oysters driving future innovation.
White elephants survive because of the sunk cost fallacy and political cowardice. Executives refuse to admit defeat on a project they have poured millions into, hoping a miracle will rescue it. To maintain a competitive advantage, an organization's leadership must possess the discipline to ruthlessly hunt down and execute white elephants, aggressively fund pearls, and carefully balance their risk capital between the reliable bread and butter projects and the visionary oysters.
So we have covered an immense amount of strategic ground today. We've tracked the evolution of the project manager from a simple foreman to a strategic linchpin. We've examined the catastrophic friction of the implementation gap and the cognitive tax of multitasking.
We broke down the mechanics of the phase gate model, debated the critical difference between payback and NPV, saw how weighted scoring matrices saved Frontier Airlines, and finally mapped the corporate ecosystem using the Matheson matrix.
For you, our listener, the ultimate takeaway is a profound shift in perspective. Recognizing that being an elite project manager or an invaluable contributor on a team is no longer just about optimizing your Jira board and delivering your code on Friday. It is about possessing the business acumen to ensure your ladder is leaning against the correct wall before you start climbing.
It is about having the courage to look at your leadership and demand a clear line of sight between your daily tasks and the ultimate corporate mission.
What elements of this framework challenge your current work environment? Are you able to confidently and mathematically articulate the strategic value of the project sitting on your desk right now? Are you spending your prime working years cultivating a pearl? Or are you quietly feeding a white elephant that your management team lacks the political courage to put down? Answering these questions elevates you from a reactive task executor to an indispensable strategic asset.
That is a phenomenal gut check. Are you feeding a white elephant? That is absolutely the question to bring up at your next quarterly review. But before we sign off, we always want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Something to process on your own that pushes the boundaries of everything we've analyzed today.
Consider the ultimate paradox of these systems. The phase gate models, the rigorous NPV calculations, the multi-weighted scoring matrices we just praised. These are brilliant, mathematically sound tools designed to ensure total alignment and ruthless efficiency. They strip out the politics and streamline execution. But what happens if the executive strategy itself, the very foundational assumptions that dictate the weights in your matrix, is fundamentally flawed?
Oh, that's a terrifying thought.
You could deploy these perfect management systems to efficiently and harmoniously build a flawlessly balanced, perfectly executed portfolio of projects that systematically marches the entire organization right off a cliff. It is a sobering reminder that a perfect project selection system cannot save a fatally flawed strategic vision. In business, efficiency is entirely irrelevant if your destination is ruin.
Wow. You can build the most perfectly tuned, frictionless engine in the world, but if the captain has confidently plotted a course directly into a Category 5 hurricane, that beautiful engine just gets you to the disaster faster. That is a heavy, but absolutely vital concept to internalize. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope it provided you with some serious clarity and a powerful new analytical lens to view your daily work through. Until next time, keep demanding that line of sight, keep challenging the sacred cows, and whatever you do, stop feeding those white elephants.